Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Comey, for being here. Mr. Comey, I'm not going to ask some questions that have already been asked by prosecutors and lawyers whose preambles and predicates you have rejected. So instead of getting a non-answer, I want to go more from a management perspective. We had General Horowitz before this committee, Inspector General Horowitz, and he identified, as you're aware, the 17 errors and omissions. And as I look at some of the errors and omissions, do you think, we know one that was identified as a crime, what do we do with the remainder? I mean, do you accept General Horowitz's reports and his findings? Do you think that they were valid?
I do, and I hope that it was followed by a root cause analysis, which any enterprise ought to engage in to figure out, so exactly why did this happen and how should we change to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Well, let's say that you came in as the new director of the FBI after the prior director had their organization studied. We found these errors and omissions. If it didn't rise to a level of a crime, in your opinion, do you think it at least should have prompted terminations and disciplinary action on the part of, these are all highly trained, highly educated, highly experienced professionals in the FBI. And by the way, the majority of them are great people, but it's a big organization. But what about the remainder? I mean, you're the new director. You've gotten this report from the Inspector General. What do you do? What is your remediation plan? I've heard you say that you would want to streamline the FISA process. I may get a question in on that, but what would you be doing right now to address the 16 other errors and omissions that occurred prior to your watch?
I'd be doing two things, looking wide and looking narrow. Wide to see what the systematic problems are, looking narrow to try and understand, so when these employees made these decisions, what were they thinking? Severe misconduct turns on whether someone was intentionally engaging in wrongdoing, and there's a range of misconduct short of that. You'd want to assess that with respect to everybody with personal knowledge and then make your judgments based on that.
You were quoted, I want to read this so I don't get your words wrong, but you were quoted as saying the FISA process was followed and that the entire case was handled in a thoughtful, responsible way by the DOJ and the FBI. You went on to say the notion that FISA was abused is nonsense. Do you still stand by that?
I don't. I don't think it was abused, but I think I was wrong in having confidence in the FISA process and in the layers of oversight and review. I was too confident in this extensive, really very complicated system.
What would have prompted you on the front end to think that it was okay? I think that you already said in prior testimony that there were things in the FISA process that should have been improved. Why, under your watch, weren't we already trying to do those kinds of changes?
Well, my confidence was based on the fact that there was regular oversight by the Department of Justice, regular audits of our cases, and then I also understood the complexity of the process. Agents would complain to me everywhere I went, it's too hard to get a FISA, too many people have to check off on it, too many people have to review my work. So knowing the process, which included regular audits, gave me confidence as any leader, as a business leader or government leader, that we have a sound, healthy process, and that was wrong.
Mr. Comey, one of the things that worry me about this is we're talking about an investigation of someone who was running for president of the United States. I, like Senator Sass, had resisted some of the changes that my colleague, Senator Lee, was putting forward, but I felt like I had confidence in a process that clearly I shouldn't have, and even the FISA court has express their concerns with the information presented to them. But you know what I really worry about? I worry about people that would never have a hearing on their case before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I mean, we're here because we're talking about a high-profile elected official. But do you have any concerns that the same sorts of lapses that were used here, and I do think people should be held accountable and prosecuted, do you have any concerns if we go back over the course of the FISA process that we've had innocent people out there subjected to the same process and potentially wrongfully received a warrant and surveillance?
Sure, it's a reasonable concern. The Inspector General did a look across dozens of cases and found mistakes, I think he said, in every case. That's a serious concern, that there's a systemic problem. Now, that doesn't mean that the warrants wouldn't have been issued otherwise, but that's besides the point. There was an issue, and if I were still there, it would be something I'd be thinking about every day, and I suspect Chris Wray is.
Well, Mr. Comey, I've got another question. I remember Inspector General Horowitz, I asked a series of questions because in the report, when he talked about a possible political motivation for the behavior of some of those involved and identified in the investigation, I asked him about, did he see any evidence of a political motivation? He said that was murky. But if you've gone through it, and I'm sure that you have, do you believe that this whole process was absent any political bias against the President of the United States, that it was just void of political bias, just a paperwork error or a business process that needed to be streamlined? Or how do you feel about that murky description that General Horowitz gave to the motivations of people? We've seen all the emails and the communications, vive la resistance. How do you feel about that? Do you honestly think that this process at the operator level was truly devoid of any political bias?
I do, and I'm not just saying that. I'm saying that because I read Horowitz's 400-page report, where I think the most important finding is in case opening and the conduct and the investigative decisions, there was no evidence found of political bias.
So you don't think it's...
He knows how to say it.
Go ahead.
If Horowitz finds something, he knows how to say it, and he found the opposite, and so that's why I say that.
But why would Inspector General Horowitz, who I think is, very capable Inspector General, go so far as to say it was murky? You say that there's no doubt, but we have him say it was murky based on the same information that I read in the report.
I don't know where I'm sorry, Senator, I don't know where the murky comment comes from. I'm talking about the report itself, which I've read very carefully a number of times, and he makes that finding. We found no evidence of political bias in any phase of this investigation.
Okay, just final question, Mr. Chair. I did start about 45 seconds late. I know Hunter Biden was appointed to Burisma in 2014, the board, while you were the FBI director and Vice President Biden was in office. Did you have any concerns, or did you have any concerns about that with, or express any concerns with Vice President Biden?
I never learned anything about it. I didn't know anything about it when I was FBI director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.